Hi guys, this is Jennifer Burrows. This is my Module 9, the case study in the Educational Leadership class. Um, in Section 1, the case study summary, in this case study we learned about Principal Richard Inman and a few of his students. First we learn about Inman and how he worked really hard to connect with some of the students from the south side of town. He figured out who the leader of the group, which was James, a 15-year-old. His relationship with the boys had started to pay off with their grades improving and no fights occurring for months. One day Inman had to talk with James about his third tardy, and while heading to the office, a teacher witnessed James give something to another student, who happened to be an honor student and an outstanding trombonist named David. Having to do something about the situation, Inman brought the two boys along with the police officer into his office. James had just reported that he gave the student something to hold for him, but when David was asked about the situation, he was very nervous, began to shake, and his eyes started to well up. A pair of brass knuckles were found in David's possession, which is a weapon and constitutes a felony offense. As David was being handcuffed, James quickly admitted that he forced or somewhat threatened David to hold them for him. At that point, the officer cuffed them both for felony possession of a weapon. A zero-tolerance board policy also demanded both boys to be expelled for 45 days to the district's disciplinary education program. For James, that was no big deal since he had been there before, but for David, this was the first, for he had never been in trouble before and he did not initiate the incident. Calling James's mom was no big deal because she had been there before with him, but David's mother was not happy and was in Inman's office within 15 minutes, which is understandable. She questioned why her son was in trouble when the other student admitted he was the one that brought the knuckles. Inman filled out the paperwork for James to be expelled but could not bring himself to fill out for David. He felt David was innocent and did not deserve to be put in the DAEP program. About a week later, Inman got a call from the director of secondary education directing him to follow through in the expulsion papers for David. Principal Inman tried to explain the situation, but the director insisted on Inman filing the paperwork or he would suffer his own official reprimand. In Section 2, this was about report legal or ethical issues. At this particular time, no student had been hurt yet, but James did have intent to hurt someone as he reported having the knuckles to use after school on someone. The obvious legal issue, though, was having a weapon at school. It can also be said that David's emotional state has been traumatized by the event, not only by being arrested, but also being bullied by James to hold the knuckles. The decision that was made can seriously alter David's current and future success and well-being. Coming from this line of work before becoming a teacher, I know that officers can interview a child without parent present unless the child requests for their parent to be present. Since the school is viewing this incident very black and white, a zero-tolerance policy, then I would have to question the legality of the student's arrest being upheld. The fact that the officer was in the room portrays a legality issue, and if you are going to question someone, they need to be read their Miranda rights before they are questioned. Another issue that arises is the fact of David being searched. Did he consent to this search? An article that I found written by Charlene Stryker states that juveniles and Miranda. Courts apply more scrutiny to police interrogations of minors than that of adults. They carefully look not only for the Miranda advisement, but also for evidence of physical or psychological coercion and indications that the juvenile actually understood the Miranda warning and appreciated the seriousness of the situation, which I'm not sure either one of these really appreciated the seriousness of the situation. Well, maybe David did, but he was just scared. She also wrote, questioning at school. Juveniles who are questioned at school are generally considered to be in custody in the sense that they don't feel free to end the interrogation and leave. So police officers who interrogate students at school frequently must advise them of their right to silence. The more interesting issue is what happens when school officials do the questioning. The student surely doesn't feel free to leave, so isn't a warning required? not unless school staff is questioning the student at the request of or in concert with law enforcement. School questioning on review. So this was like a Supreme Court case that was held. The juvenile Miranda rights were recently under review in Kentucky Supreme Court case. The case involved a high school teacher finding an empty prescription pain bottle on a bathroom floor. The assistant principal and deputy sheriff assigned to the high school guided the student whose name appeared on the bottle to a school office, where they questioned the student without advising him of his Miranda rights. He admitted to giving prescription pain medication to another student. Prosecutors charged the student in juvenile court with illegally possessing and dispensing a controlled substance. He entered a conditionally guilty plea. The judge sentenced him to 45 days in jail and community service. In considering the case of the Kentucky Supreme Court, affirmed the principle that when the matters concern school discipline or safety alone, school personnel may question a student freely. But when a school official is working in concert with law enforcement and the government might use the student's statements in juvenile criminal proceedings, statements obtained without a Miranda warning are generally inadmissible. The court therefore found that a Miranda violation had occurred. In regards to the breach of contract, Principal Inman had a duty to protect David from harassment, along with failing to act in the best interest of David. Did the principal respect and protect the reputation of David? David is now seen as someone who could be a troublemaker. In the same regards, I have to wonder if James was discriminated against just because he has been in trouble in the past. Even though he has had trouble in the past, James still deserves someone to make decisions that are in his best interest. Did these students have anyone advocating for them? Section 3. Basically, what happened? A student was coerced to hold brass knuckles for another student and was caught, which caused the student to be arrested and possibly expelled from the school if the principal follows through with the director's wishes. Section 4. Synthesize the facts. People. Assistant Principal Inman, for the first year, has worked hard to cultivate a relationship with students from the south side of town, especially James, a rather large 15-year-old student who has tattoos. James is seen as a leader among his friends and is seen as a fighter who also has multiple tardies. James was the student that admitted to bringing the brass knuckles to school. On the other hand, David is a small 13-year-old honor and band student who had never been in trouble. Principal Inman's only interaction with David was to congratulate him on a well-done concert. First, David was bullied into holding the brass knuckles and was very nervous and scared throughout the interview, and even started to cry when questioned about the weapon. Thirdly, there was a teacher involved with witnessing something being exchanged between the boys. It is unknown if the teacher was further questioned about what she saw or if she felt like David had been bullied by James. Next, the police officer was involved by being in the room as the two students were being questioned. The officer, following board policy, arrested the two students for felony weapons charge. It was unknown if the students were notified of their rights. Then both mothers of the students were contacted to inform them of the incident. James's mother was not surprised at all and thought he should sit in detention center and think about what he did. On the other hand, David's mother was shocked and angry that his son was arrested, especially since the other student had admitted to having the weapon and forcing her son to hold them for him. The major place in this incident took place at Rocket Junior High. Within the campus, events took place in the hallway of the school along with the principal's office. It was mentioned that James came from the south side of town, which indicates this being a more populated area like a metropolitan city. Another place was the detention facility that the officer took both boys to from the school. Due to weapons charges, both boys were supposed to attend the district's disciplinary alternative education program. Programs. These events are at a junior high school, but it does not specify if it is a public or private school. It is reported that the school has about about 900 students, so a rather large campus. David is reported to be in honors class and standout trombonist in the band. Another program that was discussed includes the district's disciplinary alternative education program, where the expelled students must attend for no less than 45 days. Section 5 is review and prioritize, so we need to prioritize our information. First thing I thought about was the assistant principal Inman and this being his first year as an administrator. Had he dealt with this kind of situation before, and should he have called in more seasoned administrator to assist him? Though building relationships with students is a great thing, did his relationship with James cloud the principal's decisions throughout the process? The decision that was made was damaging to both boys, but David in particular, since he had never been in trouble before and could really ruin his reputation as a student and as a person in the community. Making ethical decisions are not easy, and when you have to make those decisions regarding the students makes it even harder, because he not only had the students but also the parent to deal with. Both mothers of the students were notified of the incident, with one not giving too much thought about it but the other being very upset. Principal Inman can also be affected by having to choose between making an ethical decision of not filing the paperwork for David to be in the DAEP and getting an official reprimand, or filing paperwork for David to be expelled. In this situation, there are still things I would need to learn and investigate. Was the school policy to have the officer in the room, or should both boys be interviewed at the same time? Along with those, I would have to question first if David consented to being searched, and was he read his Miranda rights so as an individual he knew his rights. I would have liked to pull the teacher that witnessed the exchange to ask more about the incident. It also is not very clear on the amount of time between James forcing David to hold the knuckles and when they were called into the office. Did David have any time to report it to anyone? Section 6 is identify options and possible consequences. Options. First, the most obvious consequence would be for the boys to take the punishment of being expelled for 45 days and attend the district's DAEP. This option follows the board policy, and the principal does not get reprimanded. On the other hand, you could do nothing at all, but that option probably does not sit well with most. A second option would be for James to be expelled for bringing the brass knuckles, but allowing David to come back without expelling him. This option would probably leave the principal with a reprimand in his personal file. A third option could be presented that since it is David's first offense, he might be able to have a type of diversion instead of being expelled. Maybe he could be in school suspended, or an option of that with doing community service to help give back to the community. This is also something to think about with James also. Could James be given a chance to do better and make it right? Along with those options, you could do a probationary period. And if either boys get in trouble again, then their reprieve would be terminated and their sentence of attending DAEP would go into effect. Section 7 is evaluate your options. Option 1, pros. In this option, the principal follows policy and does not get reprimanded. Also, some may see it as the school following through with rules and making an example of the boys to others. Some of the cons, though, of this would be both boys would be expelled for 45 days. This is especially hard to take for David since he has never been in trouble before. This could actually cause a hard-working student to decline emotionally and academically. James is actually modeling ethical behavior by standing up for what was right and having integrity, and this option could make James doubt his actions and believe doing the right thing does not matter. Pros to the second option of not doing anything at all would be that David would not have his current and future success and well-being in jeopardy. The cons of that, though, is this would be both boys would think that making ethical and legal decisions is not important, and they can continue on with their behavior. This option might also end up with the principal getting more than just a reprimand and maybe fired. The second option of pros. David would be allowed to come back to school and continue on his honor classes and band participation. David's emotional state and academics would probably not suffer. This would show that the principal is advocating for the student. The cons would be James still does get expelled, but David would not. This may cause animosity between students or even confusion on what is ethical and legal. Would the community start seeing the school has favoritism for some students? The pros of the third option. This option gives the boys a second chance. This would be big for David, since he had not ever been in trouble before. Allowing him a probationary period with added community service is a way to communicate with the community that the school is an advocate for ethical decisions. This could show the community that the school is about second chances and putting people first. This might help David in later situations to stand up for himself when pressured to do something illegal. This might also show James that people will advocate for him, and who knows, maybe this would be a turning point for his bad behavior. Some of the cons of this would be when parents send their child to school, they want them to be safe. This option could send a message to the community that the school is not putting others, students, first by allowing the boys who brought a weapon and held a weapon to stay in school. By giving a second chance and not upholding the zero tolerance policy, this may give others the idea that they can bring a weapon and not get into too much trouble. Since not expelling the students goes against the board policy, there is a chance of the principal getting reprimanded or even fired. Section 8 is choose the best option. When it comes to being a good leader, you need to evaluate and analyze decisions in a way that promotes and advocates for individuals. The leader needs to cultivate ethical behavior within all the stakeholders. Leaders must ask what is best for the individual, not just think we have to follow the protocols. The best option I feel to do this is the third option of giving the boys a second chance. I feel that presenting it to the director would be the first step, then meeting with parents to receive their feedback. I think when presenting the information to the director, it would be beneficial if the honors class teachers along with the band director speak on behalf of David's character. An option the boys can do is to work with police officers as their community service to promote school safety. They could help with all presentations or give classroom presentations. They could also give back to the community and volunteer their time at a youth center. Section 9, implementing your decision. Since this is a type of diversion that is in lieu of being expelled, then I think a contract would need to be drawn up so the students know what is expected of them and what will happen if they break the contract. The next step is to get approval of your diversion program with the director so that he is on board. I would also need to speak with the police officer to plan a presentation that the students can do that incorporates school safety along with getting the officer on board with helping with the presentations. Another step would be to secure places like a youth center for students to volunteer at. Outcomes. Hopefully the outcomes of the diversion program would enable students to stay in traditional school, allowing them to continue with any programs they were already in, like honors classes and extracurricular activities. They will be giving back to their community and showing their teachers they are taking responsibility for their actions. This promotes current and future success of students along with proving to students that adults are advocating for them. If any student cannot act within the contract guidelines and get into trouble again, then the original consequences of the incident will be implemented which was 45 days expelled and attend the district alternative school. So who is involved? The director would need to know first of what is being implemented and then staff as well. This is important because they need to know that action is being taken and that the school is not just ignoring the incident. The police officer would need to be notified along with the plan developed for the school safety presentations. The parents and the students need to be informed of the action being taken and explain the program. The last group that need to be notified is the youth center so they can expect the volunteers. Involvement. With most of the people involved, meeting with them informally is a good option. The one group that I might want to include a superior would be speaking with the students and the parents. I think this represents the school is advocating for the students and cultivating ethical behavior in others. This also, though, indicates to the students and parents that the school is taking the incident serious and that this is a second chance, not a third or fourth chance. Informing. With this meeting involving the students and the parents, it needs to be said very clearly, and the facts need to be stated, that this is a diversion program. The students will need to be told all the requirements of the program along with what will happen if they break another school policy or rule, which would be to be expelled for the original 45 days and attend the alternative school. This is not a threatening meeting. It is simply just presenting the facts and guidelines of the program and what will happen if the contract is broken. A plan B. If my original plan of action does not work or shows not to be effective, I believe that my plan B is simply referring the students back to alternative school for 45 days. If the students get in trouble again or simply do not complete their community service obligations, then the program gets revoked and the students are expelled. My reflection on this case study. This case study really made me think about how decisions can impact students, for the good or bad. I learned that making ethical decisions usually has a gray area and nothing is always black and white. I learned that when we make these decisions, we need to not forget to put people first, even above policy. When decisions need to be made, it is important to promote collaboration among stakeholders. If we expect integrity and compassion from students, then we also, as leaders, need to show it back. As a school leader, we must formulate ideas that represent the importance of being ethical with our students and staff. We should not wait until something happens and then try to make the situation better. As leaders, we need to always be cultivating an atmosphere of ethical behavior. I feel that as a leader, I need to try to look forward and almost predict situations that may happen and have programs or policies that could address those situations and not just rely on a zero tolerance, because let's face it, that is not putting the individual first most of the time. Do not get me wrong, safety is a must, but can we do something to help students instead of burying them even deeper? This case study really made me think about ways I can help all stakeholders involved and how to be better prepared for the situations that could arise. And there are my works cited. Thank you guys. Have a good night.